Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Tom Corley, who, like me, actually is also a CFP. He's also an expert in taxation. And one of the things we're going to talk to him about today is something he has really become an expert about, which is how are wealthy people wealthy and what are the habits that they have? Tom, I know you have a very interesting story about how you got started because when you were a kid, your family actually had some real financial issues. Could you give us a little background?
Sure, Doug. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 9 years old. I was in the third grade. And I remember it was late one night around 9:30, 10, and there was all of a sudden a lot of activity in the house. And my dad was running out the door. And we asked our mom what's going on. And she said, your dad's warehouse is on fire. And, my dad didn't. We all went to bed. We were all anxious, and we woke up the next morning, and everybody in the house was anxious. My dad was back, and the warehouse had burned to the ground. And he had probably that warehouse, that business was worth around $20 million in today's dollars. So it was a lot of money that just kind of went up in smoke. It put us in the poorhouse for most of the rest of my life anyway, until I was 22, 23 when I left the house. My dad was interesting because he had some of these rich habits that I wrote about, and some of those rich habits were what enabled him to retire nearly a millionaire.
Wow. So I got to ask one question, then we're going to talk about those rich habits, which is no insurance?
Yeah, back in those days, Doug, which was in I guess it was 1969, 70, insurance wasn't like it is today. So back then, getting private insurance on your inventory was kind of unusual. So you relied on the warehouse. At least that's what my dad explained to me. And as he found out, the warehouse, the landlord who owned the warehouse, they didn't have adequate insurance. And so he and a couple other businesses got burned because of that. And that's on my dad. My dad should have done some diligence on that, but it was just business as usual in those days. And he just got caught between a rock and a hard place. He's just a victim of what I now understand is just random bad luck, which random luck affects good and bad, affects rich people and poor people fairly democratically. So, he was it just happens in life. People go life. Even if you're rich, you have instances where you just have bad luck, and he was the victim of that.
All right. Well, I'm glad he was able to rebuild it and that he had some of the habits of the rich people that you've studied. In fact, in your book, which ultimately became a bestseller called Rich Habits, The Daily Success Habits of Wealthy Individuals. So what was, let's say, one of the most surprising or unexpected success habits that you found in doing your research?
Yeah, I think probably one of them was I found that rich people flossed.
No kidding.
Right. That was unexpected to me. 62% of the wealthy people flossed every day. And the poor people just didn't. It was 6% for the poor. 70% of the wealthy people ate less than 300 junk food calories a day. And I asked specifically how many calories they thought that they consumed. That was one of my sub-questions. And so I tracked each individual, what their response was. And so 70% of the wealthy ate less than 300 junk food calories. And almost 97% of the poor ate more than that.
Wow.
The other thing was the wealthy exercised aerobically 30 minutes or more every day, 4 days a week, and the poor people didn't. They made something called hello calls, happy birthday calls, and life event calls. And these were relationship building phone calls that they made. The hello call was just a reconnaissance mission, just to gather some information on their contact and try and understand more about them. And then the happy birthday calls basically kept the relationship alive, kept it on life support at the very least. And then the life event calls were really the powerful calls that grow the roots to the relationship very deep. And I experienced that in my life. I made $60,000 doing a hello call and a life event call on just one individual. In financial planning, you're a financial planner like me, so you understand what rollovers are. Rollovers are old retirement plans that you roll over into an IRA. And just because I built a relationship with this one individual in New Jersey who was a top dog at a pharmaceutical, I was able to roll over about $1.3 million in old 401ks through these calls. So that's actually why I wrote Rich Habits. I said, boy, I've got to share this stuff, because if I can make $60,000 in 3 hours worth of work, then anybody can use these Rich Habits to make money and dig themselves out of a hole.
Wow, those are amazing stories, and I have questions about each one of them. We're talking to Tom Corley, who clearly understands the difference between being rich and poor, having gone from being poor to being very wealthy. And not only that, he spent a huge amount of time talking to wealthy people to find out the successes. Now, Tom, you told us in the first few minutes that you listed some habits like flossing, and you also spoke about picking up the phone and making hello calls. Now, I don't know how deep we can really analyze this, but it seems to me as though someone who flosses, that's a sign of being very disciplined, and someone who picks up the phone and just says hello he's very well attuned to the importance of networking. Are those the conclusions you made?
Yeah, what I found, which was interesting, was that most of these habits that the wealthy people had that made them so successful, they came from their parents. Even despite the fact that their parents weren't wealthy, as was the case for most of the wealthy in my study, the parents taught them certain good habits that that the kids took into their adult lives. And those good habits were the backbone of their success. So that's why I wrote another book called Rich Kids. I just released it. I wanted to share with the parents and the grandparents some of the habits and the strategies that I uncovered in my research, because clearly there's so many more poor people than there are rich people. Something's going wrong in the household. And I have written several articles about how poverty is actually caused by poor parenting. Parents just not teaching their kids these good daily success habits that the wealthy people received in growing up in their household. So I'm trying to level the playing field with both of these books.
So let's say that someone reads your book and he says, I'm going to do that. I'm going to start exercising 30 minutes a day, and I'm going to floss, and I'm going to pick up the phone and call people. Do you think that as a grown-up who now is beginning to see this, he would be able to change his fortunes?
Yeah, there's no question about it. The only time you're incapable of pursuing success and changing your circumstances in your life is if you're unhealthy, disabled, or near death. So as long as you're healthy and able, it doesn't matter what your age is. I always cite the example of Colonel Sanders, the Kentucky Fried Chicken. He didn't make his money until he was in his 70s. And everyone knows Colonel Sanders. Everybody knows Kentucky Fried Chicken. So he's a real great example of never quitting on your dreams, pursuing your purpose in life, even until the day you die.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's talk about some habits that maybe, let's focus on one habit. People listening to us today, and they say, I like this guy, and I'm going to for sure go buy his book, but that's only tomorrow, but I want to make a change today. What would you suggest people do today in order to improve their financial situation?
Well, I think that there's really the two top habits that I think resonated the most with me was one I call the law of association. If you want to become successful, you have to manage your relationships. And by that, I mean you have to associate with more successful people, more success-minded people. They don't have to necessarily be successful. They have to be success-minded. You have to associate with more of them than you do with people who are the opposite of that, who are negative and pessimistic. I call it the relationship seesaw. You want to get it tipping in the right direction by having more than 50% of your relationships be success-minded people. So this requires that you evaluate your relationships. I even wrote an article on the 8 types of relationships you want to avoid with the characteristics of these individuals who will hold you back in life, because there's a common, a well-known stat that's thrown around. John Maxwell throws it around a lot, and so did Jim Rohn when he was alive. And it's that you're going to be only as successful as the 5 people you associate most with. And there's a lot of truth to that, Doug, because when you associate with the right people, they open up doors to opportunities. They have the ability to fund different initiatives. They can put you in contact with people that can fund different initiatives. They can mentor you. Mm-hmm. They can open the door to for your kids, for your family, to get jobs, to get internships. So you want really to look at your relationships and try and identify them as either pluses or negatives, and then limit the amount of time you spend with the negatives to less than an hour a week, if you can. If it's family, that's it's hard to do. But,
well, I like the way you have a practical spin on that, because it is true. You are the average of, let's say, the 5 people you spend the most time with. So make sure that they are a good set of people. All right, tell us the second one, because we're nearing the end of our time.
Yeah, reading. You got to read every day for learning, not for recreation. What the wealthy people read every day, 30 minutes or more, and they read 2 or more books a month. They were relentlessly pursuing education and knowledge. And this is important because it opens up your mind. It lets you see things that you didn't otherwise see before.
I think that's very true, because it's certainly true. One of the things that we've said before is that leaders are readers, and people who want to expose themselves to become real leaders definitely have to come up with, see new ideas, and the cheapest way to do it and the most leveraged way is to read about it. Tom, those are fantastic ideas, and I know that you have a lot more in your book. Tell us in the last few seconds, how can people follow your work and follow the new ideas you're coming up with?
Sure, Doug. I post all of my research articles on my website, richhabits.net. Every new article and every new research item that I come up with, I write an article on. And so at richhabits.net, you can get all my latest research. You can also buy my books at richhabits.net and wherever books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. And also at richhabits.net, you can download free ebooks and some of my free reports that are a little bit more meatier than the articles. So that's a good place to start.
That's great. We will put links to that at the show notes of today's Goldstein on Gelt show at goldsteinongelt.com. Tom Corley, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate
it. You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.